The Real Story of Thanksgiving, full documentary. Hello and welcome everyone. As Thanksgiving approaches, most of us look forward to time with family, a table full of food, and traditions that bring us together. But have you ever wondered about the true origins of Thanksgiving? If you're like many, you might associate this holiday with images of Pilgrims and Native Americans peacefully sharing a harvest feast. But the reality of Thanksgiving is a bit more complex, and it's time to uncover the full story. The version of Thanksgiving we're most familiar with, taught to us in schools and through pop culture, often leaves out key historical facts and glosses over some uncomfortable truths. We've all heard the familiar narrative. In 1621, the Pilgrims and Native Americans gathered together at Plymouth Rock to celebrate the harvest, marking the first Thanksgiving. It's a beautiful, heartwarming story, but it doesn't tell the whole truth. In fact, many of the details we associate with Thanksgiving are myths or oversimplified versions of what really happened. In this video, we're going to explore the real history behind Thanksgiving, its origins, the evolution of the holiday, and the myths that have been passed down through generations. By the end of this, you'll have a deeper understanding of Thanksgiving's roots, and perhaps you'll think differently about the holiday we celebrate today. So, why does the myth about the first Thanksgiving persist, even though historical evidence tells us a different story? Well, part of the reason is that it's simply a story that fits well with the American narrative of unity, cooperation, and shared harvest. But the truth is that the Pilgrims and Native Americans weren't necessarily allies from the start, and their relationship was much more complicated than we're often led to believe. There were challenges, misunderstandings, and conflicts before that fateful feast. And it's not just the Pilgrims and Native Americans that we need to reconsider. Think about the turkey. The bird we all know and love as the centerpiece of our Thanksgiving meal wasn't even necessarily the focus of the meal back in 1621. We're going to dive into the myths about the foods we associate with Thanksgiving and how they've evolved over the centuries. Another myth that we'll explore is the idea that Thanksgiving has always been celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November. In fact, the holiday wasn't even officially recognised by the government until the 19th century. And it wasn't until the 20th century that it became the national tradition we know today. There's even a story about a presidential blunder that led to 2 Thanksgivings in one year. I know it sounds wild, but stay with me. Thanksgiving has changed a lot over the years. From its roots in religious fasting to its transformation into a holiday centered around feasting and football, it's gone through several phases, reflecting the changes in American society and culture. But at its core, Thanksgiving is about giving thanks for the blessings we have, even if the way we celebrate it has evolved. So, as we uncover the truth about Thanksgiving, I want to encourage you to think critically about the stories we've been told. There's a lot to learn, and while the myths are fun, the real history is even more fascinating. Let's go beyond the clichés and dive into the real story of Thanksgiving. But before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. What does Thanksgiving mean to you? Do you celebrate it the same way you were taught in school, or has your understanding of the holiday evolved over time? Drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and let's start the conversation. And if you're ready to learn the real story of Thanksgiving, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for a deeper dive into the facts and myths surrounding this beloved holiday. Let's get started. In the autumn of 1621, the English settlers at Plymouth Colony, in what is now Massachusetts, held a 3-day harvest celebration. Having endured a brutal first winter, 1621, in which roughly half the colonists died, the survivors finally achieved a successful harvest thanks in large part to the assistance of the local Wampanoag people. The gathering in 1621, often dubbed the First Thanksgiving, included approximately 50 surviving English settlers and about 90 Wampanoag men under the leadership of Massasoit. They spent several days eating, hunting, and enjoying games and displays of arms. Yet, despite its prominence in American law, the 1621 event was not called Thanksgiving by the colonists at that time, nor was it initially intended as the origin of a national holiday. Rather, it was a harvest celebration among the settlers, with Wampanoag guests that later became mythologized. The event occurred roughly between late September and early November, though the exact date remains uncertain. The menu of this feast was very different from the modern Thanksgiving meal. The colonists' records mention deer supplied by the Wampanoag, wild fowl, and fish. It is unclear whether turkey was present. The Wampanoag role was not simply as invited guests. They supplied much of the food, and the alliance between the colonists and native people was political, strategic, and rooted in mutual benefit rather than idyllic camaraderie. Thus, while the 1621 feast is often pointed to as the first Thanksgiving, historians emphasize that it does not match the traditions, nomenclature, or symbolism of the modern holiday, and it was only later recast as such. The celebration at Plymouth in 1621 was not officially labelled a Thanksgiving by the settlers. According to historian records, the first recorded day of Thanksgiving, in the sense of a religious Thanksgiving observance, in the Plymouth colony, occurred in 1623, when the settlers held a day of thanks for rain after a drought. The 1621 feast was more accurately described by the colonists as a harvest festival and a communal gathering. Further, the notion of the English settlers and Native Americans calmly, harmoniously dining together as equals is a later narrative overlay. The reality is more complex. The Wampanoag sought an alliance with the settlers, in part because they were weakened by epidemics and saw strategic value in the relationship. The settlers, meanwhile, were grateful, but also dependent on indigenous knowledge of local agriculture and hunting. The early years of Plymouth were marked by hardship, sickness, and cultural misunderstanding rather than idyllic gathering. In other words, the colonial era context of 1621 was one of survival, negotiation, and careful diplomacy, not simply a jubilant feast that marked the beginning of a long-term holiday tradition. It would take decades for Thanksgiving celebrations to become regular and institutionalized in New England. One of the most persistent myths is that the 1621 gathering was the first Thanksgiving, that it lasted a single day, that it was organized by the Pilgrims exclusively, and that they sat down with Native Americans at a table laden with turkey, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie, and all the trimmings of modern dinner. Scholarly research reveals that each of these details is inaccurate or greatly simplified. For example, asterisk. The idea that turkey was the main dish is unsupported by contemporary records. Edward Winslow mentions fowling and wild fowl, but no specific mention of turkey. Deer was a known contribution by the Wampanoag. Asterisk. The notion that the event was a bipartisan feast of equals ignores the political and military dimensions of Wampanoag-Pilgrim relations. The Wampanoag likely attended in part because of alarm at settlers firing weapons and as a diplomatic demonstration of power. Asterisk. The modern idea of Thanksgiving as an annual national observance did not arise until the 19th and early 20th centuries. The first Thanksgiving narrative only became widespread in the 1800s. Asterisk. The idyllic image of the Pilgrims and Native Americans in their stereotypical attire is a Victorian-era invention. The clothing, the setting, and the peaceful scene are romanticized. By recognizing these misconceptions, we can appreciate the richer, messier, and more truthful story of how Thanksgiving evolved, and understand why the mythology persists and why it matters. Our knowledge of the 1621 feast is extremely limited, based primarily on one verified eyewitness letter by Edward Winslow, dated the 11th of December 1621, addressed to a friend in England. This letter, published in Mort's Relation, 1622, offers the only direct written description of the event. Governor William Bradford later referenced the event in his History of Plymouth Plantation, but wrote it more than 20 years after the fact, and with less detail. Because of the paucity of sources, historians must interpret, contextualize, and sometimes infer from the fragmentary record what actually happened. For instance, we cannot confirm exactly who was invited, exactly what was eaten, or the full extent of the native presence, or their perspective. Plymouth's museum page emphasises this. In a letter to a friend in England, E.W., Pilgrim Edward Winslow, wrote the only eyewitness record of the celebration that survives. I wit. Because of this limited eyewitness evidence, many of our assumptions about the 1621 event are speculative. That margin of uncertainty is precisely why the first Thanksgiving has become a myth with layers of narrative added over centuries. Scholars caution that the event did not match our modern vision of Thanksgiving, but instead was a local harvest celebration whose memory was recast in later culture. The 1621 feast at Plymouth remains an important historical event, yet it is distinct from the modern national holiday known as Thanksgiving. Recognizing the event's true nature helps us understand how our traditions evolved, why myths emerged, and how both Native American and colonial experiences shaped the memory of that gathering. By acknowledging the limited records, the real context of colonial-native relations, and the processes by which stories were reshaped, we gain a clearer, more honest picture of the origins of Thanksgiving. In the next section, we will delve deeper into how this harvest celebration gradually transformed into the annual national holiday we recognize today. If you'd like, I can prepare footnotes and further expand this section with direct quotations from Winslow's letter and commentary on the Wampanoag perspective. Thanksgiving, one of the most cherished holidays in the United States, is traditionally defined by family gatherings, expressions of gratitude, and of course, a bountiful meal. When it comes to this feast, the centerpiece is almost universally a turkey. But why turkey? What is it about this large, somewhat awkward bird that has come to define a holiday that celebrates abundance, community, and cultural history? Turkey's dominance on the Thanksgiving table is not as straightforward as many people might assume. Its roots in the tradition are complex and shaped by both necessity and symbolism. In the United States, turkey is the quintessential Thanksgiving bird large enough to feed a family, easy to prepare, especially in modern kitchens, and with a flavour that can be complemented by a wide variety of sides. But the origins of why turkey became the mainstay of Thanksgiving dinners are less tied to an ancient culinary tradition and more to the history of America itself, from its colonial origins to its political symbolism. From a practical standpoint, turkeys were a natural fit for the early settlers of America. They were native to North America and therefore abundant, relatively easy to catch, and available across much of the new landscape. Unlike other large animals like deer, which were harder to hunt and often not available in great quantities, turkeys could be hunted in the wild and were large enough to provide substantial meat to feed a group. In fact, they played a more important role in the diets of the colonists than many people realize. But it wasn't just the bird's size or availability that made turkey an ideal choice for the celebratory feast of Thanksgiving. Turkey symbolized an American identity, a New World animal that was uniquely tied to the country's emerging sense of independence, prosperity, and the landscape itself. By the time Thanksgiving became an official national holiday in the 19th century, turkey had come to represent the bounty of the harvest and the spirit of the holiday. Turkey's prominence as the main course at Thanksgiving, however, was not always a given. In the early colonial period, when the Pilgrims of Plymouth Colony celebrated their harvest feast in 1621, turkey was not the predominant focus of the meal. In fact, historical accounts, such as the ones from Edward Winslow in Mort's Relation, 1622, do not specifically mention turkey as the main dish. They mention wild fowl, which could have included ducks, geese or turkeys and deer brought by the Wampanoag. This suggests that while turkey was certainly part of the meal, it was not the centerpiece as we think of it today. While turkey may not have been the central focus of the early Thanksgiving feasts, it gradually emerged as the centerpiece over the centuries. The shift toward turkey as the defining symbol of Thanksgiving began to take shape in the 19th century, particularly as Thanksgiving became more formalized and spread across the nation. Several key developments led to turkey's rise as the centerpiece of the holiday meal. First, the growing popularity of Thanksgiving in the 19th century saw a gradual shift in American dietary habits, moving toward heavier, more filling foods as symbols of prosperity. By the 1800s, Thanksgiving had become not just a celebration of the harvest, but a full-fledged national holiday, and with it came the expectation of a grand, celebratory feast. As the American population began to embrace more formalized meal traditions, turkey became the natural choice due to its size and availability. Additionally, in the mid-1800s, the rise of domestic agriculture and the development of factory farms made turkey even more accessible and more reliably available in stores. This shift made it easier for families to obtain a turkey for their Thanksgiving meal, and over time, this bird became so closely associated with the holiday that it became the go-to meat for Thanksgiving dinners. Another major factor was the influence of Sarah Josepha Hale, the editor of Godey's Lady's Book, who campaigned for Thanksgiving to be recognized as a national holiday. In her writing, Hale emphasized the symbolic importance of a bountiful meal to accompany the Thanksgiving tradition, and she promoted turkey as a primary choice. Hale's influence on American culture during the 19th century cannot be understated, and her advocacy for turkey at Thanksgiving helped cement the bird's place at the center of the holiday feast. Interestingly, while turkey was establishing itself as the staple of Thanksgiving, the other dishes we associate with the holiday, like mashed potatoes, stuffing, and cranberry sauce, were not yet standardized. Over the years, these foods became common accompaniments to turkey, further solidifying its role as the Thanksgiving centerpiece. One of the most enduring myths associated with Thanksgiving is the claim that turkey makes people sleepy due to its tryptophan content. The idea that eating turkey on Thanksgiving Day leads to a post-meal nap has become ingrained in popular culture. For decades, the myth that turkey contains tryptophan, a substance that induces sleep, has been passed down from generation to generation. However, when examined more closely, the science behind this claim is much less convincing. Tryptophan is an amino acid that the body uses to produce serotonin, which in turn can be converted into melatonin, a hormone that regulates sleep. Turkey does contain tryptophan, but it is far from being the most significant source of the amino acid. In fact, other foods, such as chicken, cheese, nuts, and even eggs, contain more tryptophan per serving than turkey. The idea that turkey is the primary culprit for post-meal drowsiness overlooks the reality that large holiday meals often contain a combination of factors that contribute to the feeling of sleepiness. First, the sheer quantity of food consumed on Thanksgiving Day plays a significant role in making people feel sluggish. A typical Thanksgiving meal can easily exceed 4,000 calories, nearly double the daily recommended intake for an average adult. The body expends a great deal of energy in processing such a large amount of food, leading to feelings of tiredness. Moreover, the high carbohydrate content in many Thanksgiving dishes, such as mashed potatoes, stuffing, and pies, can cause blood sugar levels to spike and then crash, contributing to the post-meal dip in energy. Second, alcohol is often consumed during Thanksgiving celebrations, and this too can have a sedative effect. Wine, beer, and cocktails all contribute to feelings of relaxation and drowsiness. It's no wonder that after a long, heavy meal with a few drinks, many people feel the urge to take a nap. So while turkey does contain tryptophan, it's far from being the primary cause of the drowsiness felt after a Thanksgiving meal. Instead, the combination of overeating, consuming carbohydrates, drinking alcohol, and the natural fatigue from preparing a large meal all contribute to the familiar post-feast slump. One of the most fascinating and lesser-known aspects of the turkey tradition is its connection to Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States. Franklin, known for his wit, wisdom, and political acumen, was a strong proponent of the turkey as the national symbol of the United States. In fact, Franklin famously argued that the turkey was a far more fitting symbol for the new nation than the bald eagle, which eventually became the official national bird. In a letter to his daughter, Franklin wrote that the bald eagle, with its dishonest and lazy nature, was not an appropriate symbol for a nation that prided itself on virtue and hard work. Instead, he praised the turkey for its courage, its manly virtues, and its connection to the American landscape. Franklin believed that the turkey was more in line with the ideals of the fledgling American Republic, as it was native to North America and embodied the rugged, independent spirit of the new nation. While Franklin's suggestion to make the turkey the national bird was made in jest, it nonetheless reflects his deep affection for this bird and its symbolic importance. Although Franklin's proposal did not come to fruition, the connection between turkey and American identity has remained strong, particularly during Thanksgiving. Franklin's endorsement of the turkey as a symbol of America reflects the bird's association with American values, hard work, independence, and a connection to the land. Today, the turkey remains not only the centerpiece of Thanksgiving meals, but also a symbol of the holiday itself. Its association with Thanksgiving has grown over the years, becoming an integral part of the tradition. Franklin's tongue-in-cheek advocacy for the turkey as a national symbol may have been an early indication of the bird's eventual place at the heart of American culture. The turkey has evolved from a native bird of North America to become the symbol of Thanksgiving, a holiday that celebrates abundance, community, and gratitude. Its rise as the centerpiece of the Thanksgiving meal was influenced by historical, practical, and symbolic factors. While the first Thanksgiving in 1621 may not have featured turkey as the main dish, the bird's prominence in American culture grew over the centuries, and today it is inextricably linked to the holiday. The myth of tryptophan-induced sleepiness, though widely accepted, is more a product of popular culture than scientific fact. The real causes of post-meal drowsiness are a combination of factors, including overeating, the consumption of carbohydrates, and alcohol. Nevertheless, turkey remains the central symbol of Thanksgiving, representing both the abundance of the harvest and the spirit of the American holiday. Finally, Benjamin Franklin's proposal to make the turkey the national bird of the United States serves as a reminder of the bird's early association with American values and identity. Though the bald eagle ultimately took its place as the national symbol, Franklin's affection for the turkey highlights its significance as a uniquely American icon. Today, the turkey remains at the heart of Thanksgiving, bringing people together to celebrate the bounty of the land and the spirit of gratitude. As the holiday season rolls around, with all its promises of family gatherings, football games, and time off work, there is one constant thread weaving through nearly every celebration: the food. Thanksgiving, the quintessential American holiday, has a special place in this culinary tradition. For many, it isn't just about gathering to give thanks. It's about indulging in a grand feast that has been carefully planned, executed, and let's be honest, anticipated all year long. But what exactly does the average American consume during this celebratory meal? And why has this particular day come to symbolize the heart of American dining? Each year, Americans collectively gobble up roughly 46 million turkeys for Thanksgiving. But it's not just about the turkey. In fact, the average Thanksgiving dinner table is a veritable cornucopia of dishes, all vying for a spot on the plate. To understand the true scope of what's consumed, let's take a step back and examine the main dish, first turkey, and then look at the side dishes that elevate this meal from simple sustenance to the celebratory feast we know today. The modern Thanksgiving table has evolved into a grand banquet, representing both tradition and indulgence. It's a meal where excess is expected, where no one is concerned about counting calories, and where the concept of moderation seems to have been forgotten in favour of culinary abundance. But how did we get here? And what exactly are we eating? When you look at the traditional Thanksgiving spread, the main course is clear. Turkey, often roasted to golden perfection, is the centerpiece of the meal. For many families, this might be accompanied by stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, and a medley of vegetables. These side dishes, many of which have roots in European and Native American culinary traditions, offer a taste of history, flavour, and nostalgia that tie the meal to its origins. However, beyond these essentials, modern Thanksgiving dinners often feature a variety of other offerings: green bean casseroles, mac and cheese, cornbread, salads, and even various types of bread rolls, all carefully laid out to ensure that there is something for every taste and preference. In fact, many Americans don't just limit themselves to one serving of turkey. They end up filling their plates with several servings of everything that has been set before them. To understand the true scope of what's consumed, let's take a step back and examine the main dish, first turkey, and then look at the side dishes that elevate this meal from simple sustenance to the celebratory feast we know today. The modern Thanksgiving table has evolved into a grand banquet, representing both tradition and indulgence. Add in the stuffing, gravy, cranberry sauce, and pies, and you can easily see how this one meal quickly becomes a caloric extravaganza. However, it isn't just about the numbers on a nutrition label. Thanksgiving is a celebration of food, family, and tradition. It's a day where indulgence is celebrated, where the table is filled with comforting, flavorful dishes that take hours, sometimes days, to prepare. It's about more than just filling your stomach. It's about the joy of sharing a meal with loved ones, laughing together, and savouring flavours that are often tied to memories of past holidays. As we mentioned, Thanksgiving isn't just about the turkey. It's a multi-course meal, each part carefully chosen to complement the others. Let's break down the typical Thanksgiving plate and examine the caloric intake of some of the most common dishes. The centerpiece of the meal, turkey, is rich in protein and, depending on the cooking method, can be a relatively lean meat. However, when prepared with butter, oil, and gravy, the calorie count can skyrocket. A single serving of turkey, around 3 to 4 ounces, typically contains around 200 to 300 calories. But that doesn't take into account the skin, the gravy, or the stuffing inside. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a slice of crispy skin with their turkey? Stuffing, also known as dressing, when it's not cooked inside the turkey, is another staple of the Thanksgiving table. It's typically made from bread, herbs, onions, celery, and a variety of seasonings, all drenched in butter or stock. 1 cup of stuffing can pack a staggering 350 to 400 calories, depending on how much butter or sausage is included in the recipe. No Thanksgiving dinner feels complete without it, even if it does contribute significantly to your calorie count. Mashed potatoes are often seen as a comforting classic, a soft, buttery side dish that pairs perfectly with turkey and gravy. A typical serving of mashed potatoes, about 1 cup, can add 200 to 300 calories to your plate, especially if you add butter, cream, and gravy. They are rich in starch, which gives them that creamy texture, but they also serve as a satisfying base for all the other hearty dishes. What's Thanksgiving without gravy? While it's often the perfect finishing touch for mashed potatoes, turkey, and stuffing, gravy can be high in calories and fat. 1 serving, about 1/4 cup, can contribute around 50 to 100 calories, depending on the recipe and how much fat is in the broth or drippings used. Cranberry sauce is a bit of a Thanksgiving paradox. It's tangy, refreshing, and provides a balance to all the richness of the other dishes. But did you know that this iconic side dish can be surprisingly high in sugar? 1/2 cup of cranberry sauce can pack 200 to 250 calories, mostly from sugar. Though its tartness offers a welcome contrast to the savoury dishes, it's easy to overindulge when paired with turkey and stuffing. Sweet potatoes are another Thanksgiving classic, often baked with marshmallows, brown sugar, and butter to create a rich and comforting side dish. While sweet potatoes themselves are relatively healthy, their sugary toppings can add significant calories. 1 cup of candied sweet potatoes can add 350 to 400 calories to your plate. Though sweet potatoes provide essential vitamins and fibre, it's easy to see how they can become a calorie-laden dish with all the added sugar and butter. Pumpkin pie is the undisputed king of Thanksgiving desserts. This rich, spiced treat often takes centre stage after the meal is over. A typical slice of pumpkin pie can contain anywhere from 300 to 400 calories, depending on the crust and the amount of sugar used. Most of these calories come from the pie's buttery crust and sweetened filling, but the pumpkin itself is high in fibre and vitamin A, which adds some nutritional value. Regardless, it's a decadent dessert that no Thanksgiving dinner would be complete without. In addition to pumpkin pie, many Thanksgiving feasts also include a variety of other desserts, such as pecan pie, apple pie, or cheesecakes. These desserts, like their pumpkin counterpart, are rich in sugar, fat, and calories. A slice of pecan pie, for example, can contain around 500 calories, while apple pie can have upwards of 300 calories per serving. When you add it all up, the typical Thanksgiving meal, complete with turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, and pie can easily reach 4,000 to 5,000 calories in total, and that's before you even consider snacks, appetizers, or second helpings. It's no wonder Thanksgiving has become synonymous with indulgence. When we talk about Thanksgiving dessert, one dish always comes to mind: pumpkin pie. It's as much a part of the holiday as the turkey itself, and its association with Thanksgiving is deeply rooted in American history. But have you ever wondered how pumpkin pie became such a central part of the holiday? Or why Americans are so obsessed with canned pumpkin, especially during the fall months? The tradition of pumpkin pie has its roots in early American cooking. When the Pilgrims first arrived in the New World, they encountered the pumpkin, a fruit native to North America. Pumpkins were abundant, nutritious, and easy to grow, making them a natural food source for early settlers. However, pumpkin pie as we know it today didn't come into existence right away. Early colonial recipes for pumpkin pies were often more savoury than sweet, and they didn't include the familiar spices we associate with modern pumpkin pie. It wasn't until the 19th century that pumpkin pie evolved into the sweet, spiced dessert we know and love. The pumpkin pie recipe was popularized by cookbooks like The American Frugal Housewife by Lydia Maria Child and by the growing tradition of Thanksgiving feasts in New England. As the recipe spread across the United States, it was refined and adapted, eventually becoming a Thanksgiving staple by the late 1800s. One of the reasons pumpkin pie became so integral to the holiday is the availability of pumpkins during the harvest season. Pumpkins are in peak season in the fall, which coincides perfectly with Thanksgiving, making them a natural choice for a dessert that celebrates the bountiful harvest. And while fresh pumpkins were once the go-to for making pies, today the vast majority of pumpkin pies in the United States are made with canned pumpkin. In fact, canned pumpkin accounts for about 80% of pumpkin used in cooking and baking during the fall. So why canned pumpkin, and how did it come to dominate the market? The answer lies in convenience and consistency. Canned pumpkin, like Libby's famous canned pumpkin, became a household staple for pie makers because it offered a quick, reliable, and easy-to-use alternative to fresh pumpkins. Canning allowed pumpkin to be preserved year-round, which was especially helpful during the off-season when fresh pumpkins weren't available. It also ensured that the pumpkin filling would have a consistent texture and flavour, no matter where you were or what type of pumpkin you had access to. Interestingly, the canned pumpkin industry owes much of its success to one major factor: marketing. Libby's, which began canning pumpkin in the early 20th century, cleverly positioned their product as the best way to make pumpkin pie perfectly seasoned and ready to use. Their marketing campaign, which capitalized on the growing popularity of Thanksgiving, helped establish canned pumpkin as a holiday necessity. Today, Americans purchase more than 1.5 billion pounds of pumpkin each year, most of it canned. In addition to the convenience factor, canned pumpkin became popular for its long shelf life and ease of storage. This allowed home cooks to make pumpkin pies well before the harvest season or in years when pumpkins were not abundant. Canned pumpkin, often sold in a familiar orange can, also became a seasonal tradition, with stores stocking up on it as early as August to prepare for the holiday baking rush. This section breaks down the foods that Americans consume during Thanksgiving and traces the history and popularity of key dishes like turkey, pumpkin pie, and more. It highlights why turkey became the center of the meal, debunks the myth of tryptophan-induced sleepiness, and explores how pumpkin pie and canned pumpkin became central to Thanksgiving traditions. Let me know if you need further elaboration or adjustments. For many, Thanksgiving has long been synonymous with travel. The idea of gathering around the dinner table with family and friends has transformed Thanksgiving into one of the busiest travel periods of the year. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, in particular, has been widely regarded as the busiest travel day in the United States. This belief has been ingrained in American culture, portrayed in countless articles, TV reports, and even popular depictions in media. But is it true? Is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving really the busiest day for travel? Or is this just a well-worn myth? The myth of the Wednesday before Thanksgiving rush has been perpetuated for decades. For years, people have been led to believe that this single day sees the highest volume of travel, a chaotic day marked by crowded highways, overbooked airports, and long delays. But when we take a closer look at the statistics, the truth is far more nuanced. According to various sources, including the US Department of Transportation and AAA American Automobile Association, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving often ranks among the top days for travel. However, it's not necessarily the busiest day. For example, many studies and travel agencies have found that peak travel times around Thanksgiving vary, depending on the mode of transportation. While Wednesday is indeed a busy day for air travel, the number of airline flights is not necessarily higher than other days during the year. Furthermore, the day before Thanksgiving does not always rank as the busiest travel day in terms of the sheer number of travellers. The fact is, other days, such as the Friday before Thanksgiving or the days surrounding the long weekend, can also experience high volumes of travel. Even more striking is the reality that many people do not follow the traditional Wednesday to Thursday travel pattern at all. Modern work schedules and changing transportation options have shifted the patterns of Thanksgiving travel, and people are increasingly flexible in when they travel to celebrate the holiday. Moreover, the assertion that Wednesday is the busiest travel day is often supported more by anecdotal evidence than by comprehensive statistics. While it's true that millions of Americans are on the move that day, heading to airports, train stations, and highways, the sheer volume of travellers is also influenced by the specific timing of Thanksgiving itself, weather conditions, and other factors such as travel advisories or changing patterns in the airline industry. As it turns out, the myth of the busiest travel day can often be debunked with a look at actual travel data. The busy travel days around Thanksgiving are generally the Wednesday before the holiday and the Sunday following Thanksgiving. However, these travel days do not necessarily correlate with the greatest number of people travelling in a single day. Let's take a look at some key travel statistics. According to AAA's annual travel forecast, nearly 55 million Americans travel over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend, which spans from Wednesday through Sunday. Of this, about 49 million Americans will drive to their Thanksgiving destinations, while around 4 million will fly. This number is significant, but it's important to note that travel doesn't stop with just one day. In fact, Sunday, the day after Thanksgiving, sees nearly as much travel as the preceding Wednesday. Airports are particularly congested on Sunday as people fly back to their homes after the long weekend. According to travel experts, the Sunday after Thanksgiving is often one of the busiest travel days of the year, with flights booked solid and long security lines at airports. The number of travellers on the Sunday following Thanksgiving rivals that of major holidays like Christmas, with millions of people returning home after spending time with family and friends. Beyond the Thanksgiving holiday, air travel trends indicate that other times of the year, such as summer vacation or spring break, actually see more people travelling overall, including more flights in total. This is important because it helps contextualize the so-called busiest travel days during Thanksgiving. AAA also notes that the increase in travel during the Thanksgiving period is largely due to people driving rather than flying roadways across the US. Experience significant traffic congestion, especially on major interstates leading into larger metropolitan areas. The combination of urban sprawl, increased car ownership, and the desire for more affordable travel options means that more Americans are taking road trips during the Thanksgiving holiday than ever before. The origins of Thanksgiving travel go back much farther than many realize. However, early Thanksgiving travel was much less common, and far fewer Americans would have participated in it. In the 19th century, most families were bound to their local communities, with the majority of people living in rural areas with limited access to transportation. The idea of travelling long distances for a Thanksgiving gathering was not a widespread practice until the later part of the century. During the early colonial days, Thanksgiving was primarily a New England observance, and even then it was more of a local tradition. It wasn't until the 19th century that Thanksgiving began to spread across the nation and take on the more formal shape we recognise today. But even then, Thanksgiving wasn't considered a time for massive travel. Transportation was a major obstacle to Thanksgiving travel during this period. Most families lived far from major transportation hubs, and travel was either by horse-drawn carriage or, if available, by railroad. Railroads had begun to expand across the United States by the mid-1800s, but they were still in their infancy. Additionally, the nation's roadways were rudimentary at best, and families would travel only short distances to attend church services or local gatherings. Thanksgiving itself was not yet a widely celebrated national holiday in the 19th century. In fact, it was only in 1863, during the Civil War, that President Abraham Lincoln proclaimed Thanksgiving a national holiday. Prior to this, Thanksgiving was largely an East Coast and New England tradition, and it wasn't until the mid-19th century that the idea of a national holiday gained significant momentum. The act of travelling long distances for Thanksgiving was, therefore, rare. It wasn't until after the Civil War, with the expansion of the railroads, that travel for Thanksgiving began to take hold. Before then, many families stayed close to home, and large-scale gatherings were more likely to take place at local gatherings or church events rather than at family homes far across the country. The shift in Thanksgiving travel began with the rise of railroad travel. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, railroads had expanded across the US, making long-distance travel more accessible to average Americans. The increased availability of trains allowed families to gather for Thanksgiving dinner from afar. Rail travel in particular began to connect small towns to larger metropolitan areas, and Thanksgiving travel grew alongside the spread of railroad networks. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Thanksgiving holiday also became more formalized in American culture. The proliferation of Thanksgiving-themed events and traditions created an expectation of holiday travel. The tradition of gathering with family and friends on Thanksgiving Day became an established norm, especially as transportation became more available. The rise of the automobile in the early to mid-20th century further transformed Thanksgiving travel. As automobiles became more affordable and widespread, families were able to travel to Thanksgiving dinner without relying on trains or other forms of transportation. Interstate highways, which began to emerge in the 1950s, facilitated this even further, allowing Americans to travel greater distances more quickly. As Thanksgiving travel became increasingly common, the infrastructure and logistics surrounding it grew as well. Major highways and airports across the US began to see a significant increase in traffic in the days leading up to and after Thanksgiving. What was once a rare and localized activity became a nationwide tradition. By the time the mid-20th century arrived, Thanksgiving travel had become ingrained in American culture, and it was during this time that the modern image of Thanksgiving as a day of massive travel began to take shape. The increased availability of affordable cars and airplanes, along with the further expansion of the transportation infrastructure, made Thanksgiving travel something that nearly every American could participate in, regardless of how far they lived from family. Thanksgiving in the United States is much more than just a meal and time spent with family. Over the years, it has evolved into a holiday full of tradition, spectacle, and, of course, commercialism. Perhaps the most iconic element of this transformation is the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which has become a holiday institution in its own right. For millions of Americans, the parade marks the beginning of the holiday season, with its colourful floats, giant balloons, and famous marching bands. However, the story of how the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade became the national tradition we know today is far more complex than most people realise. It wasn't always the massive spectacle we see today, with millions of viewers watching in person and on television. Its origins trace back to the 1920 seconds, when Macy's, a department store based in New York City, sought a way to celebrate Thanksgiving and engage its customers in a new way. The parade's humble beginnings started on a chilly Thanksgiving Day in 1924, when Macy's decided to hold a parade through the streets of New York City. The first parade wasn't as elaborate as today's version, but it had many of the elements that would come to define it. Employees of the store dressed in costumes and marched down the streets of Manhattan, while live animals from the Central Park Zoo were brought along to entertain spectators. The parade was a success and helped to establish Macy's as a key figure in New York's vibrant retail culture. One of the defining features of the early Macy's Thanksgiving Day parades was the inclusion of giant balloons. These balloons, initially modelled after popular characters and animals, would soon become one of the parade's most famous elements. But why did Macy's decide to incorporate these giant inflatable figures into the event? The answer lies in the commercial culture of the time. Macy's, as a department store, was heavily invested in attracting attention, building brand recognition, and enticing shoppers into their store. The parade, with its colourful spectacle and larger-than-life balloons, proved to be an ideal marketing tool, bringing people from all over the city to witness the event, and eventually drawing the attention of millions more through the media. The popularity of the parade only grew over time, with each year bringing new surprises. By the 1932nd, the parade had expanded its scope and begun including more elaborate floats, performances, and celebrity appearances. The growing influence of television helped to catapult the parade into a national event. In 1947, Macy's began broadcasting the parade live, allowing it to reach millions of homes across the country. This was a key turning point in the parade's commercialization. Suddenly, it wasn't just a local event for New Yorkers, it became an annual tradition that was watched and anticipated by people all over the United States. As the parade's viewership continued to grow, so did its commercial potential. The increasing presence of sponsors, corporate floats, and advertisements signaled a shift towards what we know today as the commercialized Thanksgiving event. Macy's, in particular, recognized the economic value of aligning the parade with the holiday season, using the event as a marketing tool to kick off the start of Christmas shopping. This association with the start of the Christmas season would become a defining characteristic of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a theme that would continue to shape its development for decades to come. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade was born out of a desire to create a spectacle that would capture the attention of New Yorkers and draw crowds into the Macy's store. The initial idea behind the parade was simple. Macy's wanted to celebrate Thanksgiving in a way that would reflect the excitement and optimism of the season. However, it wasn't long before the parade morphed into a major public event that would captivate audiences beyond the walls of the department store. Macy's first parade in 1924 was relatively modest by today's standards, but it laid the groundwork for the parade's future success. It included live animals, costumes, and musical performances, with participants marching through the streets of New York. However, the standout feature of the parade was the introduction of giant balloons, a concept that would forever change the look and feel of the event. Macy's, as a department store, was heavily invested in attracting attention, building brand recognition, and enticing shoppers into their store. The parade, with its colourful spectacle and larger-than-life balloons, proved to be an ideal marketing tool, bringing people from all over the city to witness the event, and eventually drawing the attention of millions more through the media. The popularity of the parade only grew over time, with each year bringing new surprises. Macy's, as a department store, was heavily invested in attracting attention, building brand recognition, and enticing shoppers into their store. The parade, with its colourful spectacle and larger-than-life balloons, proved to be an ideal marketing tool, bringing people from all over the city to witness the event, and eventually drawing the attention of millions more through the media. The popularity of the parade only grew over time, with each year bringing new surprises. But why did the parade become so popular so quickly? One reason is that it tapped into something essential about American culture: the love of spectacle, the joy of celebration, and the desire to gather with family and friends. Thanksgiving is a time of togetherness, and the Macy's parade fit perfectly into that cultural framework. Its emphasis on community, shared experiences, and the spirit of the holiday helped solidify its place as a beloved American tradition. The parade didn't just celebrate Thanksgiving, it celebrated the American way of life, and that resonated with people. Another reason for the parade's success was Macy's foresight in realizing the commercial potential of the event. From the very beginning, Macy's recognized the value of using the parade as a marketing tool. The parade gave the store an opportunity to connect with customers in a way that no other form of advertising could. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade was born out of a desire to create a spectacle that would capture the attention of New Yorkers and draw crowds into the Macy's store. The initial idea behind the parade was simple. Macy's wanted to celebrate Thanksgiving in a way that would reflect the excitement and optimism of the season. However, it wasn't long before the parade morphed into a major public event that would captivate audiences beyond the walls of the department store. Airports are particularly congested on Sunday as people fly back to their homes after the long weekend. According to travel experts, the Sunday after Thanksgiving is often one of the busiest travel days of the year, with flights booked solid and long security lines at airports. The number of travellers on the Sunday following Thanksgiving rivals that of major holidays like Christmas, with millions of people returning home after spending time with family and friends. It allowed Macy's to promote its brand and products in a festive, fun, and creative way. The combination of entertainment, spectacle, and commercialism was a winning formula, and it helped to propel the parade to national prominence. While Thanksgiving is a holiday focused on giving thanks, Macy's had a different agenda. The parade, which began as a Thanksgiving celebration, gradually shifted its focus to kick off the Christmas season. The addition of holiday-themed floats, Christmas music, and Santa Claus himself at the end of the parade reinforced the idea that the event was ushering in the Christmas season. This shift was strategically important for Macy's, as it helped the store tap into the growing consumer culture that defined American society in the 20th century. The association between the parade and the start of Christmas shopping was cemented in the minds of Americans, and the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade became a tradition that families looked forward to each year. By this point, the parade had transformed from a simple marketing stunt into a cultural phenomenon. One of the most fascinating and little-known aspects of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is the story of how the parade's iconic balloons were repurposed during World War II. The war had a significant impact on many aspects of American life, and the Macy's Parade was no exception. During the early years of World War II, the United States faced severe shortages of materials needed for the war effort. The government required businesses and organizations to conserve resources, and this included reducing the use of rubber and helium, which were crucial for the production of the parade's massive balloons. In 1942, Macy's made the difficult decision to stop using the iconic balloons in the parade, and instead, the balloons were donated to the war effort. The rubber used to create the balloons was repurposed to help make life rafts, rubber boots, and other essential war materials. The helium in the balloons was also redirected toward military purposes, including filling weather balloons and other equipment needed by the military. In place of the balloons, Macy's introduced smaller, less extravagant versions of the traditional parade floats, and the event still went on, albeit without the grand spectacle that the balloons had brought. The decision to repurpose the parade balloons for the war effort was not taken lightly, but it was a sign of the times, reflecting the national commitment to supporting the war effort in any way possible. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade resumed its use of balloons in 1945, after the war had ended and the country's resources had stabilized. However, the story of the balloon's temporary disappearance during World War II serves as a reminder of the ways in which the parade has been shaped by the cultural and historical events of the time. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is more than just a spectacle. It is a rich and complex tradition that has evolved over nearly a century. From its humble beginnings as a promotional event for Macy's department store, to its current status as a beloved, holiday institution. The parade has become a symbol of both commercialism and community. It is a vivid reminder of the ways in which holidays like Thanksgiving itself are shaped by cultural forces and how they can change over time in response to the needs and desires of society. C. Ushering in the Christmas season with its floats, balloons, and entertainment. In place of the balloons, Macy's introduced smaller, less extravagant versions of the traditional parade floats, and the event still went on, albeit without the grand spectacle that the balloons had brought. The decision to repurpose the parade balloons for the war effort was not taken lightly, but it was a sign of the times, reflecting the national commitment to supporting the war effort in any way possible. For many, this notion has become a cultural staple, shared in casual conversation, news reports, and even in family gatherings. People talk about how planes, trains, and automobiles will be jammed with people rushing to get to their family homes for the big holiday meal. Yet, this widely accepted truth is in fact a misconception. To truly understand why this myth persists, we must explore the origins of the idea and its relationship with the growing popularity of Thanksgiving as a holiday and its evolving traditions. While it's easy to assume that the day before Thanksgiving would be the busiest day for travel, especially considering it has become the official holiday for family reunions in American culture, there are various factors at play that complicate the idea. The myth largely arose from assumptions made in the mid-20th century. When travel became more accessible in the post-World War II era, it was often discussed in the context of Thanksgiving. By the 1960 seconds, as people started to travel more regularly for holidays, stories about Thanksgiving travel were being reported by the media, sometimes based on anecdotal evidence, or based on some general assumptions about family gatherings. In this time period, there were more automobiles on the road, and the rise of commercial air travel meant that more people were crisscrossing the country to join family members. However, over the years, travel statistics have shown that Thanksgiving Eve is often not the busiest day for travel. While many people still travel on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, there are other days that have historically outpaced Thanksgiving Eve when it comes to sheer numbers of travellers. The fallacy of the myth can be attributed to the overlap of travel schedules. Thanksgiving Eve has become synonymous with the start of the holiday travel season, and because it's the day before a national holiday, it's easy to assume that it's the busiest. Modern data shows that, when considering the total number of travellers, other major holidays such as Christmas and Labor Day often experience higher travel volumes, particularly with air traffic. One key factor that affects this is how different people and families choose to celebrate Thanksgiving. While Thanksgiving is undoubtedly a time for many families to gather, its focus on large family meals means that not everyone may travel the same distance, or even travel at all. This contrasts with holidays like Christmas, where travel is more uniformly spread out across a longer period of time. Additionally, the increase in remote work and more flexible holiday schedules in recent years has also led to changes in when people travel for Thanksgiving. With more people able to take time off from work or school a few days before the official holiday, many travellers are spreading out their trips, thereby reducing the pressure on Thanksgiving Eve as the main travel day. While the myth of the busiest travel day may be one of the most enduring Thanksgiving myths, it's essential to put it into perspective by comparing it with other major holidays that also see significant travel spikes. Among these, Labor Day and Christmas are often mentioned as holidays when travel patterns shift dramatically, with a marked increase in the number of people on the roads and in airports. First, let's examine Labor Day, which has become another one of America's big travel holidays. Originally celebrated as a day to honour the American workforce, Labor Day has evolved into a weekend-long celebration that marks the unofficial end of summer. Families often use this long weekend to take vacations, visit relatives, or embark on road trips. Many people take advantage of the 3-day weekend to travel to nearby destinations or to attend big events such as parades, barbecues, and sports games. In fact, when measuring traffic volume and air travel statistics, Labor Day often rivals Thanksgiving for high travel numbers. According to AAA, the number of travellers on Labor Day weekends frequently exceeds that of Thanksgiving Eve, particularly when it comes to the number of people travelling by car. While the number of people flying during Thanksgiving may be higher due to the holiday's tradition of family reunions, the overall travel volume, including both road and air on Labor Day, often surpasses the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The main reason for this is the greater spread of travel during Labor Day, which often allows people more flexibility to plan their trips over the extended weekend. Looking at air travel specifically, the numbers often tell a different story. Christmas travel tends to see more passengers than Thanksgiving, primarily because Christmas holiday travel is a 2-week affair, unlike the short Thanksgiving weekend. Additionally, Christmas travel is also spread out over a longer period of time, with people flying both before and after Christmas Day itself. The sheer volume of air traffic is typically higher during Christmas than Thanksgiving, even though Thanksgiving is associated with large family gatherings. Another reason that Labor Day often eclipses Thanksgiving in terms of travel volume is that it's not limited to just one specific day. As mentioned before, many people can take time off during the week to travel home for Thanksgiving. However, with the flexibility offered by modern travel schedules, many people opt to travel over the entire weekend instead of all trying to get to their destination on the same day. In contrast, Thanksgiving has become a holiday where the meal, often hosted in the late afternoon or evening on the Thursday itself, drives more concentrated travel on Wednesday. This makes the Wednesday before Thanksgiving seem exceptionally busy for airports and highways, but travel has a much larger spread across the broader Thanksgiving weekend. To truly understand the development of Thanksgiving travel and the shifts in travel habits, we need to explore the post-World War II era, a pivotal time in American transportation history. The changes in transportation during and after World War II would alter how Americans travelled, both for Thanksgiving and other major holidays. During World War II, many Americans were restricted in terms of how far they could travel due to the war effort. Gas rations were in place, air travel was reserved for military use, and the general movement of civilians was restricted. However, after the war, a boom in infrastructure development, particularly in highways and air travel, would make Thanksgiving travel a much more common experience for American families. With the GI Bill and the creation of new interstate highways, cars became more affordable and more widespread than ever before. This opened the doors to family road trips, allowing millions of families to travel long distances to be with relatives during the holidays. The post-war economic boom also had a major impact on commercial air travel. With greater disposable income, more families were able to afford to fly to their Thanksgiving destinations. The rise of affordable airfare led to a surge in the number of people flying to see family members across the country, making air travel a more viable option for many. As a result, the number of people travelling for Thanksgiving began to increase rapidly in the years following World War II. This also led to a shift in the focus of Thanksgiving travel from regional trips by car to more widespread cross-country air travel. By the 1,960 seconds and 1,970 seconds, Thanksgiving travel had become a staple of American culture. The convenience and affordability of air travel helped fuel this trend, and by the 1,980 seconds, the busiest travel days of the year began to consistently fall around the Thanksgiving holiday. Airlines began offering special deals to accommodate the influx of passengers, and airports became crowded hubs for travellers heading to their family dinners. However, despite the growth of air travel, the rise of family cars remained a defining characteristic of Thanksgiving travel. While air travel offered a faster, more comfortable option, many families continued to rely on their vehicles to get to their destinations. Even with the advent of air travel, the tradition of car travel remained firmly entrenched. Families in smaller, more rural areas, or those who lived within driving distance, still favoured travelling by car to Thanksgiving gatherings. The convenience of cars, the ability to pack more personal items, and the flexibility to leave and return at a time of their choosing made driving a more appealing option for many. Over the years, cars have become as much a part of the Thanksgiving experience as turkey and football, with millions of Americans packing their bags, hitting the road, and facing the long trek home for the holiday. The combination of cars and planes made Thanksgiving one of the busiest travel seasons of the year, and the holiday travel crunch became a familiar term. The hectic nature of Thanksgiving travel, combined with the unpredictable weather, led to stories of long delays, crowded airports, and overfilled highways. Yet, despite the chaos, these stories only fueled the idea that Thanksgiving was one of the most important and busiest holidays for travel. The evolution of Thanksgiving travel, shaped by historical, economic, and social forces, has been a long and complex process. From the early days of restricted travel during wartime to the post-World War II boom in car and air travel, Thanksgiving has become one of the most significant travel periods of the year. Despite the misconceptions around the busiest travel days, the rise of the family car, and the increased accessibility of air travel in the mid-28th century, set the stage for what we now consider the Thanksgiving travel season. In understanding this evolution, we gain a clearer picture of the growing importance of family reunions, travel, and tradition in American culture. Thanksgiving, as we know it today, is often rooted in a deeply ingrained myth, one that paints a picture of harmonious relations between the Pilgrims and Native Americans, culminating in a feast of mutual celebration. This portrayal, commonly taught in schools and perpetuated through popular media, has shaped how generations of Americans view the origins of the holiday. However, the truth behind the first Thanksgiving is far more complex, and much of what we think we know about the feast is an oversimplification of the reality. The widely taught version of the story focuses on the Pilgrims, a group of English settlers who landed at Plymouth in 1620, and their supposed peaceful interaction with the Wampanoag people, who supposedly helped the settlers survive their first year in the New World. According to this narrative, after a difficult year of hardship and struggle, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag shared a feast to celebrate their successful harvest and newfound friendship. The meal was said to have featured turkey, corn, and pumpkin foods that we now associate with Thanksgiving Day. However, this story, often passed down from generation to generation, glosses over many of the nuances of the situation. It simplifies the complex and tense dynamics of the early interactions between the settlers and the Native Americans. The fact is, the Pilgrims didn't even call the event the first Thanksgiving, and many aspects of this myth are based on later interpretations rather than historical fact. The portrayal of Thanksgiving as an idyllic feast between the Pilgrims and Native Americans serves a specific purpose. It presents an idealized vision of early American history. It is a story of unity and cooperation, one that fits neatly into the narrative of America as a nation of immigrants and a land of opportunity. While this narrative may be comforting and simple, it fails to accurately represent the broader historical context and the complicated relationship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people. This myth was constructed in part to promote a sense of unity and shared history, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries, when Americans were trying to define their national identity. Yet, the truth about the first Thanksgiving is far less idyllic. The Feast of 1621, which is commonly referred to as the First Thanksgiving, was not the peaceful, harmonious celebration that many have been led to believe. It was an event born of necessity, not a lasting friendship, and it was just one of many interactions between settlers and Native Americans that were characterized by tension, misunderstanding, and at times, violence. The narrative we are familiar with today about the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag sharing a meal stems largely from the accounts written by a single pilgrim, Edward Winslow, who was one of the few individuals who wrote about the events surrounding the 1621 feast. Winslow's account, though valuable, was written with a specific purpose to share the good news of the Pilgrim survival and to emphasize the role of the Native Americans in their success. Winslow's letter paints a picture of the Wampanoag offering food and support to the settlers, but it offers little in terms of the broader dynamics that existed between the two groups. The historical context is crucial in understanding why the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag would have come together for a feast. The Pilgrims had suffered significant hardships after their arrival at Plymouth, and they were at a critical juncture in their settlement efforts. They had faced disease, hunger, and a high mortality rate during their first winter. Their ability to secure a stable food supply was vital for their survival. It simplifies the complex and tense dynamics of the early interactions between the settlers and the Native Americans. The fact is, the Pilgrims didn't even call the event the first Thanksgiving, and many aspects of this myth are based on later interpretations rather than historical fact. The portrayal of Thanksgiving as an idyllic feast between the Pilgrims and Native Americans serves a specific purpose. It presents an idealized vision of early American history. While the Wampanoag may have helped the Pilgrims survive, it's important to note that the Wampanoag were also strategically positioning themselves in relation to the settlers, seeking allies against rival tribes. The Pilgrims, on the other hand, viewed their relationship with the Wampanoag through the lens of their religious mission to spread Christianity. Thus, even though they may have celebrated a harvest feast together, their motivations and the dynamics at play were far more complex than the myth allows. In addition to these nuances, the idea that the 1621 feast was an event that marked a lasting friendship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag is misleading. While the Wampanoag did attend the feast, the settlers did not immediately forge a lasting partnership with them. Relations between the two groups would quickly deteriorate over the coming decades, as the settlers expanded their landholdings and encroached upon native territories. By the 1632 and 1642, tensions between the settlers and Native American tribes had grown, eventually culminating in conflicts like King Philip's War 1675 to 1676, which was one of the bloodiest conflicts between Native Americans and colonists in American history. This gradual shift from cooperation to conflict is not often mentioned in popular retellings of the Thanksgiving myth, but it is crucial to understanding the full history of the Pilgrims and Native Americans. The early, cooperative relationship between the settlers and the Wampanoag was fleeting, and it was replaced by a long and painful history of colonization, displacement, and violence against Native American communities. So, what exactly did the Pilgrims eat at their 1621 feast? Contrary to the modern expectation of a turkey-filled banquet with pumpkin pie and cranberry sauce, the actual meal was quite different. The Pilgrims likely had a variety of fowl, including wild turkey, ducks, geese, and possibly even swans. As Winslow mentioned that the settlers went hunting for fowl, there was no indication that the Pilgrims had pumpkin pie or cranberry sauce as we know them today. The Pilgrims didn't have the necessary ingredients like sugar, flour, or butter to make pie, and there is no mention of pumpkins being used for food during the feast. Instead, pumpkins were used more as decoration, as the Pilgrims had yet to develop recipes for pumpkin-based dishes. In addition to fowl, The meal may have included fish, such as cod, bass, and shellfish like lobster, which were abundant in the region. The Wampanoag contributed to the feast by bringing 5 deer to the table. This is an important detail, as it shows the Wampanoag's active participation in the feast, but also their role as more than mere guests. They were not simply invited to the Pilgrims' meal, but were part of the group effort to make the event a success. The Wampanoag's role in the feast was not only a sign of their generosity, but also their need to secure an alliance with the Pilgrims in the face of other Native American tribes in the region. Other foods that may have been present at the feast include various vegetables that the Pilgrims had grown, such as beans, corn, and squash. The Pilgrims had learned from the Wampanoag how to grow these crops in the New World, and these foods would have formed an important part of the meal. However, the idea of a lavish spread with mashed potatoes, stuffing, and cranberry sauce is a far cry from the actual menu of the 1,621 feast. There was no mention of pies, no mashed potatoes, and no cranberry sauce foods that would become staples of the Thanksgiving table in later centuries. In sum, the first Thanksgiving feast was far from the image we often associate with the holiday. It was not an event marked by elaborate dishes or an abundance of food. Instead, it was a simple meal, rooted in necessity and survival. The Pilgrims were still struggling to establish a foothold in the New World, and the feast was more about giving thanks for a bountiful harvest and the help of the Wampanoag people than it was about celebrating a lasting friendship or creating the elaborate traditions we now associate with Thanksgiving. The myth of the first Thanksgiving has endured for centuries, shaping our collective memory of the holiday. Winslow's account, though valuable, was written with a specific purpose to share the good news of the Pilgrim survival and to emphasize the role of the Native Americans in their success. Winslow's letter paints a picture of the Wampanoag offering food and support to the settlers, but it offers little in terms of the broader dynamics that existed between the two groups. The historical context is crucial in understanding why the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag would have come together for a feast. This is an important detail, as it shows the Wampanoag's active participation in the feast, but also their role as more than mere guests. They were not simply invited to the Pilgrims' meal, but were part of the group effort to make the event a success. The Wampanoag's role in the feast was not only a sign of their generosity, but also their need to secure an alliance with the Pilgrims in the face of other Native American tribes in the region. This is an important detail, as it shows the Wampanoag's active participation in the feast, but also their role as more than mere guests. They were not simply invited to the Pilgrims' meal, but were part of the group effort to make the event a success. The Wampanoag's role in the feast was not only a sign of their generosity, but also their need to secure an alliance with the Pilgrims in the face of other Native American tribes in the region. While it is tempting to hold on to the myth of a perfect, harmonious beginning to the American holiday, the reality is much more complicated, and it is important to remember the full context of these early encounters in American history. The origins of Thanksgiving as a national holiday in the United States are deeply intertwined with the tireless work of one woman, Sarah Josepha Hale. Hale used the magazine as a platform to advocate for social reforms, including the promotion of education for women and the preservation of America's cultural heritage. However, it was her dedication to securing Thanksgiving as a national holiday that truly defined her legacy. In the early 19th century, Thanksgiving was celebrated sporadically, mainly in New England. It was not a national event, and the dates varied from state to state. Sarah Josepha Hale was born in 1,788 inches, Newport, New Hampshire, and became a significant figure in the 19th century cultural and political landscape. After the death of her husband, she turned her attention to writing, and was soon recognized as a woman of great intellect and influence. She became the editor of Godey's Ladies' Book, a hugely influential magazine aimed at American women. Sarah Josepha Hale was born in 1,788 inches, Newport, New Hampshire, and became a significant figure in the 19th century cultural and political landscape. After the death of her husband, she turned her attention to writing and was soon recognized as a woman of great intellect and influence. She became the editor of Godey's Ladies' Book, a hugely influential magazine aimed at American women. To bring this vision to life, Hale began writing letters to influential political leaders, including governors, senators, and presidents. She sent petitions, appeals, and letters to virtually every president of the United States, from Zachary Taylor to Abraham Lincoln. Her relentless correspondence was a critical component of her campaign. Hale's vision was clear. She wanted to establish a national day of Thanksgiving, observed across the entire country on the same date every year. She believed that such a holiday would help foster a sense of unity and shared identity, particularly in times of strife. Her belief in the power of Thanksgiving as a national event became the driving force behind her decades-long campaign. In her letters, she appealed to the idea of a day of gratitude and unity, emphasizing the importance of setting aside a day for Americans to come together and reflect on their blessings. She also pointed out that a national Thanksgiving holiday would reinforce American values of family, community, and gratitude. Through her advocacy, Hale began to shape Thanksgiving as a national symbol, one that transcended regional boundaries. In the 1,840 seconds, Hale's campaign gained significant momentum. She was not only writing to political leaders, but also publishing articles and editorials in Godey's Ladies' Book, which had a vast readership. Hale used the magazine to encourage women to advocate for Thanksgiving in their own states, and to promote the idea of a unified holiday. Her efforts sparked interest in Thanksgiving as a national event, and soon other regions of the country began to observe the holiday, albeit on different dates. By the 1,860 seconds, the United States was a country divided by the Civil War, with tensions between the North and South reaching a boiling point. The Civil War had torn apart the fabric of the nation, and the divisions seemed insurmountable. In the midst of this turmoil, Hale saw Thanksgiving as a tool for healing and national unity. Hale's belief in the power of Thanksgiving to unite a fractured nation was especially evident during the Civil War. The conflict had brought unimaginable suffering and division, and Hale believed that a national day of Thanksgiving could provide a much-needed sense of collective hope and reconciliation. She wrote in her letters that Thanksgiving could serve as a day of prayer, thanksgiving, and supplication to Almighty God for His blessing on our country. In this vision, Thanksgiving became more than just a holiday. It became a powerful symbol of the American spirit, one that could bring the country together even in the darkest of times. Hale's advocacy for Thanksgiving as a national holiday was rooted in the belief that Americans needed a shared moment of reflection, one that transcended political and regional differences. She understood that, despite the war, the country still had much to be grateful for, and that a unified day of Thanksgiving could help heal the wounds of the nation. In her letters, she consistently emphasized the importance of gratitude, unity, and reflection on the nation's blessings, regardless of the conflict that was raging in the country. The timing of Hale's campaign was crucial. Hale understood the power of public influence, and she believed that the support of government officials was necessary to transform Thanksgiving into a national holiday. Hale's persistence was key to the success of her campaign. For nearly 20 years, she wrote to political figures, urging them to recognize the potential of Thanksgiving as a unifying holiday. Lincoln was receptive to Hale's vision, and in 1863 he issued the proclamation that would forever change the course of Thanksgiving. On the 3rd of October 1863, Sarah Josepha Hale's relentless campaign culminated in one of the most significant moments in American holiday history. President Abraham Lincoln, who had been grappling with the immense challenges of the Civil War, issued a proclamation that established Thanksgiving as a national holiday. Lincoln's proclamation, which set the date for Thanksgiving as the last Thursday of November, was a victory for Hale and for the American people. Lincoln's decision to declare Thanksgiving a national holiday was not just a political move, it was a deeply symbolic gesture. In the midst of the Civil War, when the nation was divided and suffering, Lincoln saw the value of a shared moment of gratitude. Hale's vision of a unified holiday, one that would bring the country together and help heal the wounds of war, had finally come to fruition. The proclamation also marked a turning point in the history of Thanksgiving. What had once been a regional observance in New England became a national tradition observed by all states across the country. Her letters to President Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War were filled with impassioned pleas for him to declare Thanksgiving a national holiday. At the time, Lincoln was facing unprecedented challenges as the nation was torn apart by war, but Hale's letters reached him at a time when he was searching for ways to unite the country and bring an end to the conflict. As a result of Hale's work, Thanksgiving became more than just a day of feasting. It became a symbol of American unity, resilience, and gratitude. It was a holiday that transcended political divisions and regional differences, bringing Americans together in a spirit of thanksgiving and reflection. Sarah Josepha Hale's tireless advocacy for Thanksgiving as a national holiday is a testament to the power of persistence, vision, and belief in the unifying potential of a shared cultural experience. Through her letters, articles, and campaigns, Hale helped transform Thanksgiving from a regional tradition into a national holiday, and her efforts laid the foundation for the holiday we celebrate today. Hale's vision for Thanksgiving as a day of unity and gratitude was particularly important during the Civil War, when the nation was divided and suffering. Her belief in the power of the holiday to bring the country together in times of hardship proved prescient, and President Abraham Lincoln's decision to declare Thanksgiving a national holiday in 1863 marked a pivotal moment in American history. Thanks to Hale's determination and advocacy, Thanksgiving became more than just a day of feasting. It became a symbol of American strength, resilience, and unity. As we gather each year to celebrate Thanksgiving, we can trace the roots of the holiday back to Sarah Josepha Hale's vision and the countless hours she dedicated to making it a reality. Her legacy lives on in the holiday we celebrate today, a day of reflection, gratitude, and unity for all Americans. Thanksgiving, as we know it today, is celebrated on the fourth Thursday of November every year. However, this long-standing tradition did not come without its share of debate and controversy. The history of Thanksgiving's date is one of change, political maneuvering, and economic interests, making the story of the holiday's official date a complex and, at times, contentious chapter in American history. A closer look reveals how Thanksgiving was not always celebrated on the same day, and how, in some cases, the government's intervention in the holiday's timing would dramatically affect the American experience. The origins of Thanksgiving in the United States were rooted in regional celebrations, and for much of the early history of the holiday, it was not observed on a consistent national day. While Sarah Josepha Hale's campaign succeeded in making Thanksgiving a national holiday in 1863, the date was still not fixed for many years. Thanksgiving was celebrated on various dates across the nation, and it was up to individual states to decide when to observe it. For decades, the date of Thanksgiving varied from state to state, with the final Thursday of November being a popular choice. However, this inconsistency posed a challenge for the country, especially when it came to planning travel, coordinating family gatherings, and having a unified day for the celebration. As the 20th century progressed, the need for a fixed date for Thanksgiving became more apparent, and that is where political maneuvering, would soon take center stage. The first official federal observance of Thanksgiving occurred in 1863, when President Abraham Lincoln declared it a national holiday. However, Lincoln did not establish a permanent date for the holiday. The first national Thanksgiving celebration under Lincoln's proclamation was held on the last Thursday in November, but the date remained flexible in the years that followed. This lack of consistency created confusion and left many Americans feeling unsettled by the holiday's irregular timing. The widespread practice of observing Thanksgiving on the last Thursday in November began to take hold by the late 19th century, but the lack of a fixed date meant that each president and state could choose the day on which to celebrate the holiday. The controversy over Thanksgiving's date reached its peak during the Great Depression in the 1932. In 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt became involved in a heated debate about the timing of Thanksgiving that would forever alter the history of the holiday. The story begins with Roosevelt's desire to boost the American economy during the Depression by extending the shopping season. In his view, if he could push Thanksgiving up a week earlier, retailers would benefit from an extended holiday shopping period, thereby increasing sales and aiding economic recovery. Roosevelt's decision to move Thanksgiving to the third Thursday in November in 1939 was not universally welcomed. In fact, it quickly became one of the most controversial moves in American holiday history. The decision was met with resistance from both the public and the business community. Many people, especially in New England, were used to celebrating Thanksgiving on the final Thursday in November, and Roosevelt's decision to change the date was seen as a disruption to a long-standing tradition. Merchants, who had relied on the established timing for holiday shopping, were also thrown into disarray by the shift. The public backlash was swift and fierce. Critics dubbed the new date Franksgiving, a term that reflected their disapproval of Roosevelt's intervention. Many people refused to observe Thanksgiving on the new date, and chose to celebrate it on the traditional final Thursday of November. In some states, businesses and schools were forced to observe both days, creating a bizarre situation where two separate Thanksgivings were held, one on the third Thursday and another on the final Thursday of the month. The confusion surrounding Franksgiving reached its peak in 1939 and continued into 1940. The American public was divided, with some embracing the earlier holiday and others refusing to celebrate it altogether. Retailers were caught in the middle of the conflict, as they struggled to adjust their schedules for a holiday shopping season that had been altered at the last minute. Some states even had different ideas about which Thursday to observe, leading to further confusion about the official date. Roosevelt's experiment in moving Thanksgiving proved unpopular, and by 1941, the country had had enough of the confusion. Businesses, politicians, and the public all voiced their frustrations with the early holiday, and Roosevelt was under increasing pressure to resolve the situation. It was clear that the third Thursday in November was not going to work as a permanent date for Thanksgiving, and the president found himself facing a tough choice. After 2 years of controversy, a permanent resolution came when Congress decided to take action. In 1941, after considerable debate, Congress passed a joint resolution that would officially designate the fourth Thursday in November as the fixed date for Thanksgiving. The resolution was signed into law by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the 26th of December 1941, bringing an end to the Thanksgiving date controversy. The decision to establish Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday in November was a compromise that satisfied both those who supported Roosevelt's idea of an earlier holiday and those who wanted to preserve the traditional last Thursday of the Roosevelt month. The new date was seen as a practical solution that allowed for a unified celebration of the holiday while preserving the long-standing tradition of Thanksgiving. Roosevelt, having been pressured by the public and Congress, publicly accepted the decision and implemented it for the following year. The move to a fixed Thanksgiving date allowed for greater consistency in the way the holiday was celebrated, providing families with a clearer understanding of when to gather for their annual feast. In the years that followed, Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday of November became ingrained as an American tradition. It has remained on that same date ever since. The decision to establish Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday of November was a defining moment in American history, as it marked the end of years of debate and confusion over the holiday's date. The new date became the standard, and Thanksgiving was no longer subject to the whims of political figures or regional differences. The holiday became a time for Americans to come together, give thanks, and enjoy a shared tradition that spanned the entire nation. The controversy over the date of Thanksgiving is an often overlooked chapter in the history of the holiday. While Thanksgiving is a beloved holiday, its date was not set in stone until the intervention of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and the subsequent action taken by Congress in 1941. The Thanksgiving controversy, which occurred in 1939 and 1940, highlighted the complexities of creating a unified national holiday in a country as vast and diverse as the United States. Thanks to the resolution passed by Congress, Thanksgiving became fixed on the fourth Thursday in November, giving Americans the certainty of when to celebrate the holiday. This decision, while initially controversial, ensured that Thanksgiving would continue as a unifying force in American culture, a day for giving thanks, sharing meals, and spending time with loved ones. The story of Thanksgiving's date is a testament to the challenges of creating a national holiday and the importance of tradition in uniting a country. Today, Thanksgiving remains one of the most cherished holidays in the United States, and its date on the fourth Thursday of November is now an enduring part of American life. Thanksgiving, a holiday initially rooted in gratitude, survival, and community, has evolved over the centuries into a modern-day spectacle. This transformation has seen the day stretch beyond its humble origins into a multifaceted event where family gatherings, enormous feasts, football games, parades, and retail giants play pivotal roles. While the essence of Thanksgiving remains rooted in giving thanks for what we have, it has morphed into an essential part of American culture, often taking on a larger-than-life presence in people's lives. This section explores how Thanksgiving has evolved into what it is today, highlighting key elements such as family traditions, football games, commercialization, and how retail culture has integrated itself into the holiday. Thanksgiving in the 21st century is far different from what it was intended to be during the 17th century. Over the years, the simple, humble meal, shared by Pilgrims and Native Americans, has morphed into a much grander affair. While the origins of Thanksgiving centered on giving thanks for a bountiful harvest and surviving the harsh conditions of the New World, today's version of the holiday involves mass consumption, entertainment, and the very essence of American consumer culture. The shift toward a more commercialized and public holiday began in earnest in the mid-20th century. It is no longer just about gathering with family around the table to enjoy a meal. Thanksgiving has come to represent something far larger. One could say Thanksgiving now symbolizes the unofficial start of the holiday season, ushering in the frenzy of retail promotions, the beginning of the Christmas shopping season, and a prelude to the indulgence that follows in December. This evolution, largely driven by consumerism, has reshaped the holiday, turning it from a day of solemn reflection into a full-blown commercial event. For many, Thanksgiving Day begins not with a prayer or reflection, but with the excitement of a huge meal shared with family and friends, which often includes multiple rounds of food, from appetizers and main courses to dessert. This transformation has seen the day stretch beyond its humble origins into a multifaceted event where family gatherings, enormous feasts, football games, parades, and retail giants play pivotal roles. While the essence of Thanksgiving remains rooted in giving thanks for what we have, it has morphed into an essential part of American culture, often taking on a larger-than-life presence in people's lives. As we gather each year to celebrate Thanksgiving, we can trace the roots of the holiday back to Sarah Josepha Hale's vision and the countless hours she dedicated to making it a reality. Her legacy lives on in the holiday we celebrate today, a day of reflection, gratitude, and unity for all Americans. Thanksgiving, as we know it today, is celebrated on the fourth Thursday of November every year. However, this long-standing tradition did not come without its share of debate and controversy. In many households, it is now common to gather in the late afternoon for a family meal, then venture out to stores in the evening to take advantage of doorbuster deals. Retailers' shift in opening times, from midnight to earlier in the evening, only underscores how Thanksgiving has become less about family and reflection and more about commerce. The tradition of playing football on Thanksgiving started in Ivy League schools in the late 1800s, where teams would play a championship game on or around the holiday. This tradition of college football on Thanksgiving continued to grow in prominence throughout the early 20th century, culminating in what we know today as one of the largest sporting events in America NFL games on Thanksgiving Day. What started as a college football tradition expanded into professional football, with the National Football League, NFL, playing a major role in the evolution of Thanksgiving Day sports. In 1934, the Detroit Lions hosted the first ever NFL game on Thanksgiving, beginning a tradition that would continue every year, with the exception of the World War II years, and would come to define Thanksgiving Day for millions of Americans. The Detroit Lions and Dallas Cowboys continued to play on Thanksgiving, but by the early 2000s, the NFL added a third game to the lineup to increase the entertainment value for football fans. Today, millions of viewers tune in to watch football on Thanksgiving Day, with teams, families, and individuals enjoying the games as part of their larger holiday celebration. For many, it's an American tradition to watch or attend a football game in between slices of turkey and before heading to the dining table for pie. The symbolic connection between football and Thanksgiving Day has made it not just a break from cooking or the frantic preparations that precede the big meal, but a social event that brings families, friends, and communities together. The Thanksgiving football games offer a kind of communal experience, where people can bond over the game, share in the victory or defeat of their team, and enjoy a collective sense of Americana. From high school games to professional football, the day is defined by the camaraderie of sports, much like the communal feasts of the past. Interestingly, Thanksgiving Day football wasn't always the massive television event it is today. The games used to take place mostly in the afternoon, with families getting together to watch local teams. But with the rise of the NFL's national influence, football on Thanksgiving has become one of the most watched events of the year, contributing to the overall cultural significance of the day. Thanksgiving, in its original form, was about gratitude, sharing, and feasting. However, over time, the commercialization of the holiday has grown exponentially. The commercialization of Thanksgiving is inextricably linked to retail culture and the pursuit of consumer spending. Stores and advertisers have long capitalized on Thanksgiving to generate buzz for the impending holiday shopping season. In fact, the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday has become synonymous with shopping sprees, discounts, and consumer frenzy. Retailers saw Thanksgiving as the ideal day to start marketing for the Christmas shopping season. Once Thanksgiving dinner is over, many families have nothing else to focus on except preparing for Christmas. As stores began to open earlier and earlier for Black Friday, Thanksgiving started to lose some of its focus on family and tradition. While some Americans still cherish the idea of sitting down for a large family meal and reflecting on the year, for many, the real excitement of the holiday comes from the sales, promotions, and doorbusters associated with Black Friday. The shift from a food-centered holiday to a shopping-centered one reflects broader cultural changes in American society. The way Americans now celebrate Thanksgiving is emblematic of the growing power of consumerism in modern life. As shopping opportunities for Thanksgiving continue to grow, with stores opening on Thanksgiving Day itself, the lines between holidays become increasingly blurred. Thanksgiving is no longer just about family or gratitude. It's a major consumer holiday that plays a role in driving the American economy. Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which had its first official parade in 1924, is another example of how Thanksgiving has become a highly commercialized event. Originally intended as a promotional tool for the Macy's department store in New York, the parade has evolved into one of the biggest and most watched events in the world, attracting millions of viewers both in person and via television. The parade not only promotes the store itself, but has come to symbolize the start of the holiday season for most Americans. In the post-World War II era, advertising and marketing strategies began to evolve, and they increasingly targeted families as consumers. Thanksgiving advertisements would encourage families to shop for not only their holiday meal, but also for home appliances, gifts, and holiday decor, reinforcing the link between Thanksgiving and the shopping season. Moreover, as Thanksgiving Day became a significant retail event, a new consumer culture emerged in which the day was not just about food and family, but also about deals and discounts. This transformation has made Thanksgiving a paradoxical holiday. On the one hand, it is still a time for family, reflection, and gratitude. On the other hand, it is a retail-driven occasion that fosters a culture of consumption. The commercialization of Thanksgiving has affected the way Americans experience the holiday. For many, it has shifted the focus from communal and familial gathering to consumer-centered behavior. Family meals have become more extravagant, with larger portions, more courses, and even take-out options for those who prefer not to cook. While these changes have contributed to a more convenient and accessible holiday experience, they also reflect the pressure to indulge and consume. The shift in focus from family gatherings to shopping sprees has also affected how Thanksgiving is spent. With stores now open on Thanksgiving Day itself, many people choose to leave their families to hunt for deals, often sacrificing time with loved ones in favour of savings. As a result, the true meaning of Thanksgiving can sometimes get lost in the hustle and bustle of shopping, leaving some people feeling like they are participating in a holiday that is now more about consumerism than gratitude. However, despite this shift, the deeper traditions of Thanksgiving family time, feasting, and reflection remain at the heart of the holiday for many. For some, it is still a day to focus on gathering with loved ones, giving thanks, and sharing a meal. This divide between the commercialized and traditional aspects of Thanksgiving has created a unique dynamic in modern American culture. Thanksgiving, as a modern holiday, represents a fusion of family traditions and consumerism. It is a day that brings people together to share a meal, reflect on the year, and spend time with loved ones. At the same time, it has evolved into a major commercial event, with football games, shopping, and parades playing significant roles in the overall experience. This transformation reflects broader cultural shifts in American society, where consumerism and retail culture have come to play an increasingly prominent role in our daily lives. As the holiday continues to evolve, it remains to be seen how Thanksgiving will adapt to the changing cultural and commercial landscape. What began as a simple day of reflection and gratitude has morphed into a national event, shaped by advertising, retail, and entertainment. Thanksgiving's journey from a religious and reflective occasion to a consumer-driven spectacle is a testament to the power of American consumer culture. Nonetheless, at its core, Thanksgiving is still a day to pause, appreciate what we have, and share a meal with those we love. Thanksgiving in modern America, with its grand feasts, football games, parades, and shopping sprees, has become a complex holiday that combines family traditions with an enormous commercial apparatus. While the external trappings of Thanksgiving may seem far removed from its origins, the holiday at its heart still holds great meaning for many people. Beneath the surface of consumer-driven festivities, Thanksgiving remains a time to reflect on our lives, express gratitude, and gather with family and friends to celebrate the bonds that hold us together as a community and a nation. This conclusion seeks to strip away the layers of commercialization and myth surrounding Thanksgiving to rediscover its true spirit. Thanksgiving is a holiday that has morphed and evolved over the centuries, but it remains one of the few national observances that is not overtly tied to any specific religion, culture, or political agenda. In a nation as diverse as the United States, Thanksgiving provides a rare opportunity for people from all walks of life to unite under a common theme: thankfulness. The real spirit of Thanksgiving is rooted in the universal human experience of being grateful for what we have, appreciating the abundance of food and resources, and recognizing the importance of family, community, and shared experiences. In its modern form, Thanksgiving may seem like a day of indulgence, but at its heart, it's still a time to pause and reflect on the blessings of the past year. While the holiday has been commercialized in many ways, it still retains a sense of tradition that reminds us of the struggles, triumphs, and sacrifices that have shaped our nation and our families. Thanksgiving serves as a reminder that, despite the challenges of daily life, we have much to be thankful for. It encourages us to reflect on the relationships we have built, the lessons we have learned, and the progress we have made as individuals and as a society. One of the things that make Thanksgiving unique is its ability to unite people across political, religious, and cultural divides. While other holidays may have more specific meanings tied to religious observance or national identity, Thanksgiving stands as a day where people come together, regardless of their background, to share a meal and give thanks for the good things in their lives. Whether you're a traditionalist, a secular observer, or someone who embraces the holiday's roots, Thanksgiving remains an inclusive celebration of human connection. At its core, Thanksgiving is a time to be with loved ones, reflecting on the blessings and hardships of the past year. Family gatherings are central to the celebration of Thanksgiving for millions of people. It's a day when families reunite, sometimes after long periods of being apart, to share a meal, tell stories, and create memories that will last long after the leftovers are gone. In a world where so many things can feel uncertain, fleeting, or out of our control, the stability of family and the warmth of shared traditions provide a powerful sense of comfort. The importance of family is not just about blood relations, but also the people we choose to be close to, friends, neighbours, and extended families. Thanksgiving provides a space where the concept of family can be redefined to include anyone with whom we share a bond of affection, care, and mutual respect. The idea of coming together takes on a new meaning when it's about more than just the food or the holiday. It's about connecting with others on a deeper level, reaffirming the ties that bind us to one another. Alongside family, gratitude is the centerpiece of Thanksgiving. In the hustle and bustle of everyday life, it's easy to overlook the many things we have to be thankful for. Thanksgiving reminds us to take a moment to reflect, appreciate what we have, and recognize the countless blessings that often go unnoticed. Whether it's a good meal, a roof over our heads, the love of friends and family, or simply the opportunity to live in a world where we can gather safely and freely, Thanksgiving invites us to express our gratitude openly and without reservation. Thanksgiving, then, embodies the American spirit in many ways. It's a holiday that celebrates generosity, community, and the values that have shaped the nation since its founding. As much as Thanksgiving has evolved in terms of its customs and practices, its underlying values have remained constant. The holiday asks us to appreciate the hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance that have brought us to where we are today, as individuals, families, and a country. It encourages us to look back with gratitude, while also setting our sights forward with hope and optimism for the future. It is also a time to remember that Thanksgiving is not only about giving thanks for what we have, but also about extending a hand to others who may not have the same luxuries. Many families and communities use Thanksgiving as an opportunity to give back, whether through volunteering at soup kitchens, donating to food banks, or supporting those in need. This spirit of generosity reflects the deep-seated values of American culture, where charity and kindness play a vital role in maintaining the social fabric. While the modern celebration of Thanksgiving is filled with familiar imagery, turkey, football, and family, its history is far more complex and layered. The myth of the first Thanksgiving often oversimplifies the true story, reducing a complicated, multi-dimensional moment in American history to a feel-good tale of harmony between Pilgrims and Native Americans. The real history of Thanksgiving is far richer, involving struggles for survival, complex relationships between settlers and indigenous peoples, and a centuries-long evolution of traditions that have shaped the holiday we recognize today. The origins of Thanksgiving trace back to the early 1600s, when the Pilgrims settled in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The event, traditionally considered to be the first Thanksgiving in 1621, was not called Thanksgiving by the Pilgrims at the time, and it was not a celebration of the kind we know today. The feast was more a practical gathering, an expression of relief and gratitude for a successful harvest and a hard-earned respite from the challenges of survival in the New World. The Pilgrims did not have a grand vision for a national holiday, nor did they have a clear understanding of what Thanksgiving would come to symbolize in the future. Furthermore, the relationship between the Pilgrims and Native Americans, particularly the Wampanoag people, was not one of mutual respect and lasting friendship as often depicted. While the Wampanoag played a significant role in ensuring the Pilgrims' survival by teaching them how to cultivate crops and hunt local game, the peace between the two groups was short-lived. The complex history of settler colonialism in America cannot be reduced to the myth of Thanksgiving as a harmonious union between two cultures. The true history is a narrative of survival, cooperation, and conflict, which is too often glossed over in favour of a more palatable version of events. To truly appreciate Thanksgiving, we must confront and understand this history. Rediscovering the true origins of the holiday helps us break free from the oversimplified myths and challenges us to think critically about the ways in which the past shapes the present. It also serves as a reminder that we, as a nation, are constantly building and reshaping our traditions, both as a reflection of our values and as an attempt to make sense of our shared experiences. As we learn more about the origins of Thanksgiving, it becomes clear that the holiday is not a static institution, but one that has been shaped by many factors over time. From the Pilgrims' Feast in 1621 to the 19th century campaign led by Sarah Joseph Hale, and from the eventual official recognition of the holiday to its commercialization in the 20th century, Thanksgiving's story is one of continuous evolution. Understanding its true history allows us to appreciate the holiday's significance and to engage with it in a deeper, more meaningful way. Thanksgiving is a time to come together with loved ones and reflect on the blessings and challenges that have shaped our lives. While the holiday has evolved into a celebration of consumerism and spectacle in many ways, its deeper meaning still resonates. At its core, Thanksgiving is a time to reconnect with those who matter most, whether they are family, friends, or neighbours, and to express gratitude for the opportunities we have. However, it is also a time to reflect on the history of Thanksgiving, acknowledging both the struggles and the successes that have shaped it. It is important to remember the complex and often painful history that underpins the holiday, particularly in relation to Native American experiences and the consequences of colonization. By doing so, we can approach Thanksgiving with a greater sense of awareness, empathy, and respect for the diverse histories that contribute to the fabric of our nation. In modern America, Thanksgiving is more than just a meal or a day of rest. It is a chance to give thanks, to reflect on the past, and to make commitments to build a better future. Whether we are honouring the traditions of our ancestors or creating new ones, Thanksgiving remains an opportunity to appreciate the simple joys in life and to give back to those who may need help or support. In the spirit of unity and gratitude, we can continue to celebrate this day as a symbol of the strength, resilience, and generosity that define the American experience. So, this Thanksgiving, let's remember the true spirit of the holiday, a time to gather together with loved ones, reflect on the blessings we have, and honour the diverse histories that make up the rich tapestry of our shared culture. Let's use this holiday to give thanks not just for what we have, but also for the opportunity to come together, learn, and grow as a nation and as individuals. And, most importantly, let's use Thanksgiving to recommit to building a more inclusive, compassionate world for future generations.